My name is Chelsea Cain, and I am best known as a thriller writer, a writer of murder. I like to say I kill people for a living, and I also write comic books. One, I think of myself as a storyteller instead of a writer. Writing to me is it's a blunt instrument to communicate a story, right? It is a tool that I've worked very hard to learn how to pick up and wield so that I can tell a story. So I grew up reading books and comics, but not with the idea that I would write them one day. It was more that I was always in a process of correcting them. So I did a lot of daydreaming about how I would have ended the story. I wanted to write books. I liked that form even as a little kid. The first word I learned how to spell was flower. All of the kids wanted to learn how to spell their own names, which was really practical. Whereas I, given the choice, because our teacher was like, "I will teach you any word." And I was like, well, obviously, the most practical word is flower. I would like to learn how to spell that. And I practiced over and over again. And the first thing I did was to staple all of the flower pages and make a book. So even then, I really loved the idea of pages turning. And by seventh grade, I had started writing novels. I had an IBM Selectric typewriter from my grandfather. And I wrote a novel, about a female PI in Bellingham, Washington. Again, I was in seventh grade. I had no idea how adults behaved. But she was solving crimes and taking names. Just because I wanted a way to take this story that I had in my head and make it an object in the world. The story I have in my head is pictures, right? It is a film. And so it's learning to write novels was a way to develop the skills that allowed me to take the film I was seeing in my head and translate it in a way that would somehow create an experience that was somewhat similar to what I was seeing, but only using words. And comics, right? I start with the same film, but it's a different toolbox, right? To figure out how to write a comic book script, which is, I think people read comics and you think about it, what the writer must do, and I think it's natural to assume the writer is just writing the words on the comic book page, right? In the caption boxes and in the thought balloons and stuff. And in fact, a comic book script, 90% of the words are art direction. It is writing a panel by panel description of what we're supposed to see for the artist then to create. And that is very much a new way of communicating. And I really had to kind of learn how to describe what I was seeing in my head in a way that would be useful for the artist when they were drawing it, which is very different than how I would describe a room, say, in a novel for a reader. One of the things that drew me to comics is that it is a collaborative experience. And writing a novel is really just about being alone in a room, for years at a time. And writing a comic, it's just more kinetic. It's a lot more collaborative, and there's a lot more communication, and there is this amazing potential to elevate the story in ways that I could not have imagined alone in the room. And that's that is the best part, is when whether it is the artist or the colorist or the letterer, anybody brings in an element that is not something I would have thought of, that makes it so much better. That's, that's the thrill.
Well, um,
Maneaters, which is a comic I write about girls who turn into werepanthers when they get their periods. We have a team of three main collaborators who 13-year-old collaborators, now 14 in fact, who work on the comic, and then we bring in others as well, so it's generally 3 to 5, and mostly they're such an incredible resource. I really felt like I had been a middle school age girl, but a while ago, and I really wanted to bring in to represent the experience of what that is now. And I am just so inspired by that generation of kids right now. It's one of the things that gives me hope. And, we did pay them all. And the best part about paying these teenage girls for their work on Maneaters is that we had created a company called the Ministry of Trouble. So, like, literally these girls, their first checks they'd ever been given, like for work they had done, were from the Ministry of Trouble, which made me very happy. Just to give you an example of what they bring to the project, I had asked one of the 13-year-olds, is in fact my daughter, Eliza, and I'd given her an assignment to write a first-person essay from the point of view of a cat. And that was it. That's all I told her, right? I had like 2 pages to kill at the end of an issue, back matter. And she went off. She came back with this first-person essay about a cat, and she wrote it from the point of view of her cat in our yard being called in by Eliza at night at the end of the end of the day. Eliza going out, calling in her cat, and it was from the point of view of the cat and the cat's resistance, the cat's temptation to stay out in the night, and the cat being drawn to the possibilities of what might be out there, beyond the yard. And at the same time, the cat wanting to go to the girl, like loving the girl and knowing that the girl's going to pick the cat up, and the girl's going to has this fuzzy robe on, and the cat will be hugged and carried to the girl's bedroom and will sleep in this safe, warm bed. And then the cat, like, finally deciding to go to the girl. And to me, like, that story so epitomizes, like, what it is to be a 13-year-old, right? That you're just started this, like, early temptations of being drawn away and, like, looking for that kind of excitement and wondering what is beyond the yard. At the same time, not wanting to give up the connection, right, to the family home and to the safety of the bedroom. And I could never have come up with that, right? I never could have done it, and it couldn't have been more perfect. Sure, like, why, frankly, why there was such an outsized response. And I think the answer is different than what many people believe to be true. So with Mockingbird, right, that was a comic I did 8 issues of for Marvel, and it was about a female character written by a woman, and there were always people in the kind of fanboy community who felt defensive or alienated about that, the fact that this female character was being given real estate. They felt was like somehow pandering or whatever, and they were resistant to that. And there was definitely like people who just accused me of having a feminist agenda, which I was like, well, yes, I do, obviously. So the last issue, I put her in this t-shirt that said, "Ask me about my feminist agenda." And there was a lot of response to that, but I really think that most of the, the tipping point on the internet was when I left Twitter. It just felt like it was all of these, I was getting all this feedback on Twitter, which is very much the kind of comics bulletin board, right? That's the kind of social networking platform of choice for comic book fans and creators. And I was being attacked in like pretty misogynistic terms that I felt like were really unreasonable, and by people who really did not want to engage in a conversation. And just as if I were walking down the street and a crazy person were screaming at me, like, that crazy person has the right to scream, but I don't have to stand there. I can keep walking. So I decided to keep walking. One of the last tweets that I got before I left was that I needed to like stand there like a man and take it, that this proved somehow that feminists, weren't tough. And that's bullshit. And I left. And then things kind of really exploded once I was gone. Because there's part of the community that really feels like they have a First Amendment right to like be heard. And that's not how the First Amendment works. The First Amendment lets you speak, but it doesn't require that, somebody stand there and listen to your rant. I think it was a way to talk about something, just a cultural tension, right? Like it was right after the whole, like the sort of the Trump tapes and like just this kind of, there was a lot that people needed to talk about and didn't have a way to talk about, and it became this huge media story. Like I had news crews on my porch. Yeah, I had people like from all over the world, these like, BBC, like, huge media companies trying to get in touch to talk about it. Again, because I think they saw it as a way to talk about something that was happening in the culture, that they felt like this could epitomize somehow. Because it's the internet will sometimes bubble back into like my consciousness. And there was this one image that somebody had drawn of Mockingbird, like brutally raped. Clearly like she'd been beaten and raped and was like dead or dying. And it said, "Ask me about my feminist agenda." And it was like, this person was not untalented, like it was somebody who had penciled this and inked it and colored it and like had spent a lot of time to like make this image that was just so brutal, and so just like misguided and it just so problematic and troubling in so many aspects. It was kind of heartbreaking. I have literally never had a bad interaction in person. Like I go to a lot of comic conventions. I do a lot of panels. I'm available, right? I'm sitting at a table signing stuff. And I have never had anyone been anything less than completely lovely. One of the reasons that I wanted to write comics to begin with was that it is such an incredibly great community. And I've gone to comic book conventions for years and years, like long before I wrote comics, because I want to be part of that community. Like the great thing about like conventions is that like whatever you're into, like people are like, you be you. Like, if you want to cosplay as a tree stump or as like a payphone, or if you're like super into like strawberry shortcake, everybody's like, that is so awesome. Like how great, like love what you love. And I think we could all use a little more of that. Art should be dangerous. It is when I feel nervous, when I'm sitting at my desk working and I feel nervous about the content. Those moments where I think like, I'm sure I will take this out later, but I'll just write it down now. It's those moments, like those moments are always the parts that everybody loves the most. The parts that I hesitate to write. And the voice of reason is the voice that says like, no, your grandmother's going to read that, honey. Like maybe law school is a pretty good idea. Or, right, the voice of reason has a lot of really smart things to say. Like the voice of reason is right about everything. And if you want to be an artist, you need to take that voice of reason and you need to strangle it and you need to bury it in the backyard. The internal editor, it's really important to silence it when you work. And even if you have to tell yourself that, again, like you will edit it out later, just get it down. And, like one of my great regrets, maybe my only regret about the kind of blow up about Mockingbird is that, that maybe there were some people who thought they might want to write comics who, when that happened, decided that it was too scary and that it would not be worth it. And I think that it's so important to not think about how something is going to land and to understand that like to take those risks, to write dangerously and to stay off the internet when it comes out. I would very much support it. I would buy 100 copies. I'd bring Pepsi.